This is my endgame Promethean ship. It is fairly vanilla, there are no thruster stacks, there's only 4 cryos to do science, and yet it is able to consistently handle 215,000 eggs every cycle, and it runs at a maximum speed at 471 on the way out and 491 on the way back. If you give it 5 minutes to load its various components from Aquilo and Navis, then the complete cycle takes 50 minutes. And this 5-minute wait configuration is significant because with that setup, you can scale this ship to have 9 copies of it. And you will be able to perfectly smooth out the Promethean delivery to the equivalent of 8 full green belts of science, or 116,000 packs a minute, which is equivalent to 2.5 million effective SPM at higher research prod, which is what I am sitting at right here and have been for some time. You can see there's always 6 ships basically in the outer solar system edge. So effectively it's built around the idea that I only have to swap out a new ship at Navis every 5.5 minutes to keep the production going. Everything else is pretty relaxed and I can run without any buffers on Navis. So I've mainly been doing this as an experiment to see how far it is possible to scale out this small ship approach to the megabase level. In particular, I wanted to see if I could do this without thruster stacking, because I think that mechanic is kind of broken and trivializes the speed aspect. It also kind of makes the ship ugly in my opinion, and I expect it to be fixed at some later patch. But you know, if you like it, use it, it is a game. But this is my motivations. So let's first compare some ship characteristics a little bit, because I've noticed a couple of benefits and drawbacks from running small ships. In particular, as a person who likes to operate stuff, I like things that are simple, because they are less work. Small ships end up being easy to understand, edit, maintain, and easy to ratio out productions. You can scale them horizontally. They naturally smooth out the delivery of science, because by definition they only bring, you know, like a normal delivery of science, 650,000. So you don't end up having smaller buffer on Navis, which costs UPS if those are too big. You also naturally smooth out the component requirements, because there's less requirement on things being extremely fast when the cycle time is this large. In fact, I spent like 3 cycles on Navis doing quantums, and it's just this little array here, which, you know, it looks large, but I've seen much larger for less SPM than what I have here. And also a benefit, like even when you're deep in the field here looking at all these asteroids, I can still look at all of this and FPS is still decent. Well, this is lower than normal. Probably, well, yeah, it varies a little bit, but I'm also recording right now, which I'm not normally. And this is definitely different from when I look at any of the bigger ships, because then my UPS is down almost immediately. And I've actually found from many hours of experimentation that this can be pretty UPS efficient overall as well, because, you know, this natural reverse cigar state means you don't spend up rendering asteroids endlessly down the ship for your thruster stacks. Just have a little bit on the side here. You can naturally direct insert a lot more, since the production needs are kind of low. You don't have to put ore on any belts. You don't have to put eggs on belt. You don't have to put science on belt. So that ends up being kind of nice. But of course there are downsides too. If you have 9 ships and you're modifying them, they are annoying as hell to actually roll out any changes to other ships. I end up having 1 ship that's like my experimental branch, effectively, and I make changes to that. I wait 100 hours after rolling out things to see if anything goes wrong, and if things are okay, then I'll bring all the ships to Vulcanus, where I do a big cut and paste operation. But you know, that's annoying, and also you might have to run the ships a little bit in like test mode, not test mode, but you know, test drive them around a little bit in the solar system to just get more asteroids, because you might have exhausted the buffers if you replace the entire front, say. So that's annoying. There's also kind of a large cycle time that is wasted by having all these small ships, because like when they finish, like this one's finished now, it's almost 300,000 kilometers into the deep field, and at this point all it has to do is get back, but it's not doing anything productive other than getting back. So all of this time here is just spent endlessly, yeah, you know, shooting this amount of rockets, not doing anything useful. If this was a much larger ship, much deeper, you know, I could in theory save a lot more. And because it's a 50-minute cycle, that means you also need a lot of ships to fill the gaps. If I need a ship every 5 minutes, then I am going to need 9 to 10 ships, you know. And there's actually kind of a natural limit to how many ships you can do with the bathroom key. So at a certain point, you have to start scaling up the critical section. So, you know, UPS-wise, this is not necessarily the most efficient ships in terms of raw science produced per millisecond, particularly since it's competing with the thruster stacking meta. But all that aside, I have a solid 60 UPS with 9 ships doing constant research prod at 2.5 million effective SPM, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go through bits of it. So if we break down the journey, 50 minutes of the journey is going to be spent traveling back and forth, and then in total we spend 5 minutes distributed over these 3 planets. 90 seconds on Aquilo loading quantums, up to a minute on Fulgora waiting for the bathroom key, which this one is about to pick up, and this one will drop off. And then you spend 3 minutes on Navi's loading. Let's see, this is going to be number 9. You're probably done. You're probably done right now. Yeah, so you're off, and then you're going to drop off the key. So in total, you spend like 5 minutes outside, and if you just look at those numbers, if you wanted to optimize for throughput, the biggest factor to optimize out is the ship speed. So let's talk about the speed, because like this thing doesn't necessarily look that aerodynamic, but as far as width matters, it's only matters insofar as that you have everything covered in thrusters, and this ship only has 2 tiles of non-tiled engine width. And the rest is extremely slimmed down. It is compacted up, everything is kind of hauled out. And the weight does matter quite a bit for the speed equation. Not as much as I would like, but it does help. Like, to caveat, I think the weight optimizations I've done has saved maybe 4 or 5% on the speed. But, you know, travel time is long, so that actually amounts to 2 minutes. So the stuff I've done, basically all the cargo bays sits out here, and they are minimized to contain at most 650,000 science and 22,000 quantums, because at peak load you will never have all of Egg, science and quantums at the same time. Every 100 tons that I managed to remove from the ship allowed me to go through an extra 3,000 eggs. And the ship is now 550 tons lighter than when it was a 6 tile taller rectangle, when it was based on one of Hobbit's ships, the Trigrab Pella. But at this point, it's kind of far removed from that. Only some of the core layout ideas kind of remain. Like all the asteroid collection has changed. There's extra side collectors of Prometheum. There's no sushi belts. The turret setup is completely different. The rocket production here is completely new and half the size. Most of the crushing is direct inserted. So, you know, but credit to him for getting me started. His ship got me quite far, and he has a lot of good ideas, a lot of which have survived. For belting, all of the Promethean chunks are directed towards the hub, where all of the cryos are. Every 6 grabbers basically can saturate a full green belt of Promethean chunks, and then you want to give at most 8 inserters dedicated to each belt. I technically have more than 8 full belts, because I have 3 extra side grabbers here to help top up early on. Basically, they let me saturate a little earlier on. They actually let me go through an extra 10,000 eggs overall, but they do necessitate a little more fussy, like priority splitting belts. There's like this weird thing coming in here, dumping some things on the bit that would normally be empty. Thing with priority here, extra belt here with priority on the normal belt, but then like fills in the gaps in the end here. So yeah, it looks a bit awkward, but it gives me an extra 10,000 eggs without adding weight, adding adding any width to the ship. And these extra grabbers end up being best placed on the top side here, because you see a lot of these Promethean chunks end up scattering outward. So as a result, you end up with this hammerhead design almost organically. Science output is all direct inserted into the hub mostly via this. And it's a full hand. This one, similar idea, but this actually waits a little so that the one that can direct insert to have priority, so you don't waste too much in between. That goes through a belt, and that's crucial because otherwise these inserters here never actually sleep if you put them on the ground. And this is why these belts here are actually pointing against the flow, but that's actually fine. As for the crushing, oh yeah, asteroids first. All asteroids are on the belt. There are no sushi for this. Like the ice comes in here. Basically, at higher asteroid productivity, the asteroids end up being a lot denser than their crushed counterparts. So it's a lot more efficient to just have them have small buffer on belts. And the short asteroid belt is actually a lot easier to deal with than full asteroid sushi anyway. Because you can do like this stuff like this, inline crushing. If you should probably have asteroid prod 30 to use speed modules, otherwise I would put speed in this. Also possibly put a speed module here, a speed beacon here. These one might be fine, they're already beaconed. So a metallic sits in between the foundries. The output belt comes out here, and it goes on the output side of the belt, which means it actually gets just inherent priority with the input belt, and that's enough. We want to prioritize the advanced output so that we don't waste copper, or so that we don't ever run out of copper, and that means we basically throttle the basic recipe by only using it if we're really low on ore in this foundry. And that's enough of that. Oxide, and they follows this a very similar setup. There's a similar belt that loops up here, goes on the output, so that's priority with the input here, just natively. And this one needs a little bit of both. So the easiest way I found to ensure we are topped up with ice is to just read this belt and top up otherwise, because they use pretty much half and half. The only time we actually put any ore on the belt is for the oxidizer, and the extra the calcite for that actually just ends up going down here and into the fuel side. Carbonic sits on this side. Big dedicated carbonic grabber, actually buffers some in the grabber too. Oh yeah, that actually is true here too. This grabber, this buffers ice and metallic. The number of it is set by this circuit here. This one is just a full constant grabber of carbonic chunks, which go on this belt down here and into the advanced recipe. The advanced recipe direct insert into both the coal and to the dynamite, so basically all of the sulfur goes straight into machine. They're never on the belts. It does produce a little bit of overflow of carbon, and that ends up on this belt here, which goes onto this side. This is actually the fuel belt, and because the overflow goes on the bottom, that luckily ends up being the side which the fuel ends up pulling from by priority. So everything else that's not used here, that ends up just being chucked into this little hole. And in the 1% of the time we're not making rockets, these guys are not active. As you can see, these guys have made 4 million each, whereas this has made 27,000, so it's like active at 1% of the time. It's the basic recipe, tops up here, and it's being pulled from if the bottom side of this belt is completely exhausted. Crucially, the output from this goes on the right side, so that's actually the priority that these guys use. So it ends up working out pretty well. I think this is Koenig's design that he has on his ship. Venting. Let's see, do we have a ship that is going? Let's do this. The venting system sits here. That is basically safety to account for asteroid variants or other snags in the supply chain. You don't want to be stuck with eggs that are going to hatch on the ship, because they will take down the ship if there's too many of them. Previously, in an older iteration of the ship, there was venting way out here. That's a 25-second travel time from the hub. That's bad, because that's 20 seconds less of production than if you were venting right by it, which is here. So 20 seconds of production at peak is actually 4,000 more eggs that you can go through, so way more beneficial to have that nearby. The venting system is basically these three circuits. It is set by this tick timer, which is the amount of ticks it takes from you receiving the first batch of eggs until the last batch of eggs has expired. And for me, that turns out to be 32 minutes, which is 115.2k. And that is perfect if you have 6 loads with legendary spawners. If you launch slower, you have to increase this number. If you launch in less cycles, you have to decrease this number. And so that's, yeah, so this start counting from when you start receiving eggs. I think this sets the timer. This sets the timer. And that number then gets, you subtract that number with the tick timer, you subtract the number you set with the number of ticks since you received, and multiply that by 4, and now you have a continual upper bound to compare eggs against. So if you ever have more eggs than this thing will periodically pulse out some eggs to ensure that this is the maximum eggs we can hold at this time. There's also like some separate safety systems here. This is a bunch of safety conditions, partially inherited from Hobbit, to deal with some error cases. They shouldn't really happen at this point, but if you have some snags in supply chain, they can happen. There's also a circuit to kind of warn you if that is happening. But there is one, oh yeah, and you can also manually vent with this combinator. Let me just show what happens. Bam, and then now a bunch of eggs goes out. There is one case that is kind of significant, and that is this system here. That is the abort system. Because I have a system on the ship with speculative loading. So to talk about speculative loading, I have to talk about the token system, because that is the thing providing back pressure to the ship, which is effectively a system that is preventing you from having too much stuff in the hub. Because if you start loading eggs and you cannot unload your science, these bays will fill up. Like, it's the size is designed around not having more than 2 main components at a time. So I want to make sure that we get rid of most of the science before starting. And the original token system does this with this barrel that goes in and out of the hub. And if the barrel is not on the ship, it is an unsatisfied request that's sent to Navis while we're over Navis. Navis is going to see that request. That is an unsatisfied request, and so this part will not be true right now. There's no ships, so that's true. But when a ship comes in and it's not ready to receive, this is false, and this is true. So we're not going to send any eggs until this thing comes back into the hub, signaling that the ship is ready to receive more eggs. So that's back pressure. The original token system was doing this on the hard limit of 0 science. That is way too early, because the last bit of science to leave the ship can take like 40 seconds to get rid of the very last stray 1,000 science. And also, you know your hub is going to go through stuff, so it's more efficient to just like let it gradually drop as you, particularly you're spending 3 minutes over Navis, like you see right now it's dropping like the first couple of 100,000 immediately, and the thing is already come in from the hub, I think, or is it still there? Oh yeah, it's still there. Okay, so we're at just at the limit, I guess. We are at 253,000. I think it's going to come in now. There we are. So now that's request is satisfied. Now the eggs are being sent. So that's the back pressure part of this. But that system has a flaw compared to the original token system, and that is that because you are starting to request while you have science, there's a chance that someone changes the research while this is happening. And if that happens, then you will fill up. There's not really enough cargo base to handle all 3 components at the same time, so you're going to have problems. So I want to avoid that, and the way I avoid this is by detecting it as we are traveling towards a kilo. Basically, if we have science and we have eggs, and we're on the way to a kilo, then activate this radioactivity signal, which is sticky until the eggs are emptied. And what happens with this signal is that it's being sent it is being sent to the hub via this alarm, and what happens then is that it triggers this interrupt. Basically go to Gleba, and on Gleba get rid of all of your eggs. Basically on Gleba I have this egg crusher right on the hub, because this happened a couple of times. Not too many. I crushed a couple of, maybe 1 million eggs. You can also use it for overgrowth soils, of course. But it's mostly a one-time safety system that you need just to for that time you're changing signs. So you can change this number as you want. I have 250k. You just needed to have it to a number that is that you can get through while you're over Navis. It's set in 3 places. It's here, here, and I believe here. Right, so let's go through ammunition. Because this ship only uses railguns, rockets, and gun turrets. There are no lasers in front here, other than the ones that are explicitly just targeting the biters during venting. The launchers also are staggered, uncommon, and rare, because you don't need to you don't need to create particles really far away from the ship, like you will end up like blasting way up here. If you have legendary launchers, it's not necessary. I was recommended this as a UPS improvement. To be honest, I didn't notice too much benefit from it, but I did notice that I got a quite significant reduction in rocket usage, because these guys tend to no longer target the same stuff that was happening all the time before. So actually it uses 10% less rockets than when I was using legendary. So that's kind of nice. I think that most of it comes from the fact that these railguns effectively get to penetrate more big asteroids as it shoots, because they get closer to the ship, so you get more bang per buck for each railgun shot. But yeah, rocket production. We only have this setup here, fueled by these 2 dynamites. They're quite heavily beaconed, but they're enough for 3,500 rockets per minute. Let's see. Let's look at the explosive ones. And the peak use for me is, 3,200, ignoring like the worst minute. That didn't used to be the case before I had the rare and uncommon rocket launchers. I used to be up in 3,500. And the reason I'm using this little is because I'm at the very last breakpoint for explosive damage, which is explosive 31, which is a fairly expensive 16 billion research. So before, when I was at 23, which is the previous breakpoint, when you start two-shotting things with splash, absolutely the minimum thing you should have for this ship. When I had that, I was using 4,500 rockets per minute, which, that's still less than what this produces. So like if you're at that, you might need to add another 3 of these somewhere, try and shift this stuff out. I don't know. It is possible that you could, in theory, run this as is on the lower ones, maybe with even lower quality stuff, because like if you're using 3,000, except for like the worst minute, or if you're using 4,000, which is 500 less than it produces, then these the belt buffer here, it's a huge belt that goes around, loops around. There's actually 12,000 rockets on this belt, so you can in theory be like in 500 deficit per minute for 20 minutes and still not run out. Like then, and this is only like 10 minutes of peak production, 15 minutes of peak production, so you might be fine, but it's gonna be close. Red ammo for everything else. All of the other ammo is produced in this belt, also split the same way. It's also measured the same way. There's the buffer is around 3,000 for each of these. It's just a single ammo factory for red ammo. That's enough. I just had to beacon it a little more after changing the quality of the rocket turrets, because they end up shooting a little more mediums, because there's less explosive splash around. I think at the physical 22 is when you start two-shotting mediums with red ammo, so that should be enough. Let's see if there's any more hub stuff. Venting system, timing system. This is the dynamic return circuit. Basically compares eggs times 5 with Promethean science. As a kind of upper bound, ends up returning 500,000 kilometers in, with little variance depending on how much asteroid that you actually end up encountering. This big ass combinator here stands in as the hub, because I don't want to have all of these green wires on the hub, because then it's possible to see what's going on. You also get to shield. They'll basically filter out to just the signals that you care about, so I can hover over these and see like these. This is just a small subset of inputs that I care about. There's on the left here we have these combinators, which is in charge of controlling whether the cryos run, because we don't want the cryos to be running until we pass the Quilo. Otherwise you might run out of, you might have less quantums than you're requesting, and you cause requests for quantums again. On the top here you have Koenig's clock for the asteroid collectors. Might have helped a little bit on the UPS. I saw maybe like 5 to 10% at most. Like I did other things. Unfortunately I tested with other things at the same time. I've limited it to when we are inside of this field. So all of these things, all these inserters, all of these grabbers are disabled unless we're in the deep field. Otherwise, telemetry, you can see there's actually these dynamic statuses that are visible on the map. These actually update, so you can see when I'm hovering over it, I can see the values at a glance, how far each ship is, and you say, oh cool, this is quite far along. It's 600,000 science in, it's got around 10,000 eggs left. The top two are just like a quick indicator of the ammo. It's almost out of quantums. So that is quite convenient. It's all done with display panels. Kind of annoying to set up. I've done it once and copy pasted them across. The ones at the top here, actually I have a blueprint to just like generate, because it's just like percentage based, so there you can actually generate them. Just give it the max number and the item that you want to measure. As for alerts, this is an alerting circuit. Every signal that sends an alert goes through, except for the ammo, annoyingly. And I can turn them off if there's an annoying one. It's effectively snoozing the alarms, but I have to turn it back on again. Particularly this is because the damage one tends to be very sticky, and I only take... Oh, the venting system is venting. Guess we're at the end. Yeah. The damage, I only really alarm if there's a big hit, like 5,000 damage, just like a big on one of the railguns or something. It can happen, but it's never really causes any problems. Like I keep a couple of extra, like this maintenance thing here, ensures that we have 5 replacements of everything in case something happens. There's also plenty of repair packs. This doesn't really matter, it shouldn't happen, but if we have too much science, it's in there. If the load is too slow, that is measured via this circuit. Basically on 6 loads, it shouldn't exceed 10,000 ticks, so I'm sending this wait signal so that I can be notified of it. This is never really triggered, except for that one time there was a bug in one of the experimental Factorio versions, and I wasn't sure why suddenly it took an extra 40 seconds to load, but then updated Factorio and that was fixed. So anyway, you want the loading to be pretty precise because it affects your SPM. And then finally the alert here is for if there's like an anomalous vent event, and that happens, where is the circuit for that? That is if any venting happen while you have more than 50,000 eggs left. It shouldn't happen unless you're in the special interrupt case. But normally some venting does happen at the end, like we just saw here. Normally we don't reach the max of 648, which is the theoretical max with 216,000 eggs. Normally we end up at around 245. So finally, let's throughput. Let's talk about that. If we get 645,000 and we do that over over 50 minutes, then that's 12.9 thousand Promethean per minute, times that by 9 ships, and you end up with 116,000 Promethean science per second. And you know the theoretical maximum that you can get from 8 belts, is 240 per second, is 115,000. So at this point, I am able to do the maximum, let's actually show the consolidated production of Promethean. Bam bam. This, yeah, this is, you can see, quite spiky. But if you average it out, you can see I'm producing 114.7 and I'm pulling that same amount. I did say I'll be able to do 116, and the reason I'm producing less is because the hub is full, and that's because these ships are effectively waiting 20 seconds before they start requesting eggs at this point. So that's the back pressure. So I've effectively reached my goal throughput, and I don't need any bigger buffer on navis. My 700k would be plenty, to be honest. So UPS wise, normally the space in vanilla without any mods, I sit at 15 milliseconds. Right now I've enabled the 2 UPS mods that removes asteroid particles and weapon particles, because, you know, that's effectively just making this easier to see. It really should be a graphics option. It doesn't do anything else. Otherwise you're just like spending CPU doing the something that's effectively free Bitcoin mining. So I've turned that off, and I'm down to, well, 12 now. Normally I'm at 11 when I'm not looking at things and not recording. Effectively, yeah, it's easier for me to just talk about the numbers. I found that the ship contribution, by basically comparing the research prod to like any other research, like worker robot speed, that there's less than 6 ms difference. That's obviously like a holistic test, because I don't really do much editor testing, but should be less than 6 ms for all the ships in total. I have applied a bunch of optimizations here and there, most of which have come from the technical Factorio Discord. Like all of these factories are kind of clocked, or all the inserters only operate when they need a swing. Try to direct insert as much as possible. There's a latch on the ice, which you can see is all of these ice guys are only active 50% of the time. All of these fuel outputs self-limit so that they don't push too much against when the buffer is full. Actually, let's actually go and show the active state. You can see the little red circle blinking when it's inactive, and you can see most of this factory sits inactive most of the time. You can see they only wake up when the signals tell them to, and you can see the same on the inserters here. This is normally not true for grabbers. All of these guys tend to be active all the time without some clocking. Oh yeah, the collectors are clocked too, so that's what you see, this blinking light here every 6 frames. They get a chance to grub. It's kind of weird that this actually works, because obviously they're active all the time. Yeah. Also, there's less sushi belts in terms of UPS. There's less left to measure. Obviously, I'm measuring this. It's obviously a very short belt, but you know, I'm also measuring this belt because I kind of want to see how much stuff I have. I want to have alarms if the ammo drops beyond the crucial point. So, you know, there's a certain amount of stuff I am willing to part with. But yeah, I don't really do too much benchmarking in this game. I don't really enjoy it too much. I play the game to simulate operating dangerous production machinery, and I am a reckless software engineer who likes to test in production. But effectively, what has mattered for me has been, in terms of like total base APS, has been more reducing total bots. I have very few bots actually running over the hub. I think I have kind of 1,000 bots active in total. I moved all my science to navis, all the ones that can be anyway. Cryo and metallurgic are uncommon, so that saves quite a bit, and they're basically free to double. My gleba is like half of what it used to be, because when you optimize the flow and do many ships to deal with freshness, then the things just end up being flowing a lot smoother. And at the end of the day, like, I am running 60 UPS on on this base at 2.5 million SPM with 9 active ships. So I'm very happy with that. Particularly looking at like where it started with, like actually let's look at the blueprints. If I have the old ones, it started out. This is the one that's closest to Hobbit ship, the old style, except I've removed the lasers out of the grabbers. This is my first iteration of my ship. That's 2,150 tons, and Hobbit was basically saying he could only run 2 of these ships before he started running into UPS issues, and I'm running 9, so can't be that bad. But like I also ran his save, and he had like 10,000 bots in total, so you know you'd have some differences there. I think that's actually going to be more significant than anything else. Environment-wise, as you can see, there's probably not stuff in here that you're not used to seeing, because this is running on Linux. Because Factorio runs native Wayland, and ends up actually being pretty fast. Actually, I'm also running with game mode for performance, for priority, basically, scheduling. And I'm also running Mimalloc for huge pages. So all of those things together give me a pretty decent performance. So, you know, mileage may vary. People do say they're getting 25% performance gains on switching to Linux, but I can't really test it because I've been on Linux for quite some time. But would recommend. Right, finally, I guess blueprints, which I have put somewhere, maybe linked somewhere, is effectively this book here, which contains the ship and the seed. I would recommend that you plant down the seed to start out, and then you can enable a logistic group that effectively gets you fluoroketone, power stuff, legendary barrel, and bootstrap asteroids before you put on the main blueprint, and then before putting on the main blueprint you need to remove the power and the fluoroketone. It's important that you have some asteroids to bootstrap the ship, because otherwise it takes ages for the buffer to fill up. This, particularly the ice, there's very little ice around, so you kind of have to be driving the ship quite a bit, and it takes a while to get enough ice to even get these guys to be running at a decent pace. So get it something to start, so that you can start running loops up to Aquilo, and then alternate a little bit between Aquilo and then Vulcanus to get carbonic, and do that until all these lights are green, they have enough rockets. Then you should be good to go. Also, while you're constructing it, maybe put like a laser here and there just to make sure that you can take down things as you're building before you have ammo. Also, the name of the ship is actually from the kanji for fire and eagle. That's actually the same, the hiwashi, it's actually the same as the kanji being used for Atheon, the eagle tormenting Prometheus in the Greek myth. So I thought it's kind of random, but I thought it fits the theme pretty well. Kanji is also kind of compact, so you don't have that many characters to work with in this thin space. So I like to keep like one emoji for what the ship is, what version of the ship, the name, and the number of it. So at that point I'm already out of characters if I want to add specifiers. So anyway, that is it. I hope this was somewhat interesting to you. I'd love to hear how many eggs you are taking on your ships. And of course, if you have any cool ships or stuff to share, then please post stats or links or anything. My name is Glux, and thanks for watching.